This is the last Currie Cup podcast. We've gone past the final now. Belinda's Sharks emerged victorious, and we haven't heard the end of it since Saturday, non-stop.
Nice.
And poor Clinton has now managed to lift his head and he's agreed to talk to us. So let's hear what they have to say. Firstly, congratulations, Belinda. Well done on your team. And secondly, Clinton, commiserations. You guys, you were basically one of the top dogs in the championship or the competition right towards the end. And then you basically lost it in the last seconds of that match. So let's start with that, Clinton. Tell me about that. How you felt and what you think about the Lions as the season.
Hi, good afternoon, and hi, Belinda. Nice to see you again. Not, no, I'm only joking. Yes, Envia, it was, as we all know, a promising season for the Lions. I mean, they started like a house on fire and just kept on going throughout this competition. And we had that one loss against the Sharks, and we spoke about a while ago where I thought that they veered off their game plan of not keeping ball in hand, and they went back to that. And yeah, so they were really on track to add the icing to this cake at the end. We didn't know until like two days or so before the game what the weather was going to be like, and well, we heard that it was going to be rain projected in that. But geez, what a day of weather that was. So yeah, like you say, I mean, the Lions went into this game, and in our conversation prior, I said we will not be overconfident because the Sharks are a very well balanced side. Look what they did in Pretoria. And I thought, it would take a lot for that team to replicate that 2 weeks in a row for Highveld. Well, they did. Um, so, yeah, very disappointing at the end there. I mean, I pulled some stats here of the game. If you look at the game as a whole, the Sharks were doing more of the work. If you look at it, I mean, they had 129 carries compared to the Lions 80. They had 400 odd run meters compared to the Lions 200 and something. So they were doing all the work. The Lions on the other side were doing all the defending. The Lions actually defend 152 times, but they missed 33. The Sharks defended 102 times, they missed 8. But funny enough, even though the Lions missed those 33 tackles, they only conceded one try, and the Sharks conceded two. So yeah, it was really, we clawed our way back right at the end there, and yeah, disaster struck. We're still talking about it. The coach is devastated because I mean, for one, Zaki Nkosi has done so well. He had his disastrous 2 seasons in the Currie Cup, and this season he really came on in leaps and bounds. And I think he deserved to have the Currie Cup lifted, aloft. But yeah, the game got right to the end. The Hoots had gone, and for some unknown reason, the Lions decided to maul instead of kicking that ball out. Which then led to a maul that they started doing on that. And we all thought, and if you look at the replays, you all thought that it was illegally pulled down by the Sharks. The ball came back on the Sharks side, and the referee gave the Sharks a penalty instead of the Lions. But anyway, and that obviously ended up in Jordan Hendricks's penalty that won the game. But the biggest thing for me, the biggest no-no in that game was why start a rolling ball when the Hoots is gone? You could have kicked it out. You are leading.
Yeah, Belinda. He said everybody thought the Sharks did it illegally. Are you one of those everyone's? You agree with that?
It's tricky because I haven't been able to rewatch the whole game. And you obviously miss stuff in the stadium. I think all I will say is that there were some questionable decisions made both ways, and let's just leave it at that. I think as Clinton rightly points out, whether that mall was taken down illegally or not, the decision making was extremely poor on the side of the Lions. Why they didn't kick it out? I mean, I had at that point resigned myself to the fact that the game was over. We weren't going to win. It was going to be a 1 point defeat, which was the story of the day, it seems.
Mm.
But so I don't understand that thinking at all. And and I think we spoke about this in the last chat that we had, and we've spoken about it a few times over the course of this season. is that this Currie Cup has been all about game management, decision making. And I think I said to you last time we chatted that this team is going to do well because they've showed this persistent belief in themselves and this determination, like not to give up no matter what's happening, not to let their heads drop, all of that. And that's what decided the game at the end. I mean, how many teams would opt to kick the penalty after the hooter has gone when it's a 59-meter kick? Like, there's not many teams that are going to have the balls to do that,
Mm.
frankly, and then be able to pull it off. So I know that that last few moments were heartbreaking for the Lions. I know that. And so I've seen a lot of upsetness about that more and all of that. I get that completely. But I think the decision making and the BMT is what really came into play there. It was the deciding factor, and very proud of the guys for that.
You talk about decision making, Belinda. What made you decide to go to the stadium and at the real field temperature was like close to 0 degrees? I mean, what on earth possessed you? I mean, for the life, even if the Bulls played, I wouldn't have gone. I tell you what, you were. I thought midstream was bad, but it wasn't a shadow, a patch of this.
Listen, that is the coldest I think I've ever been generally, never mind in a stadium. And I lived in Ireland, and like it was freezing. In fact, the first game I ever went to was in Dublin, and you couldn't even see the players on the field. It was so misty and freezing, and I wasn't as cold that day as I was on Saturday. It was, I could barely feel my legs by the time I was leaving. But but you have to back your team, right? You have to be
Mm.
there to support them. It's the final. You can't not go. I mean, if it had obviously been in Durban, maybe it would have been a different story. I might not have traveled for it, but there was no way I was going to miss them if they were playing in the final at Ellis Park. It's right here. No excuses.
Herbal Iceman Cooling Gel, the secret player on the rugby field.
Clinton, something that caught my attention is the fact that I think the Sharks dominated this entire game. And the Lions they weren't really there. I don't know how to explain that. I mean, they came back towards the end, to lead by that single point right towards the end. And we thought they actually now thought back and they pulled it out of the fire. But they were basically on the back foot. Your stats just confirmed that all the time. And that's not what I expected. I expected the Lions to be far more dominant, or where I'm going with this. What does it say to you about the Lions' potential in the URC? Because this is basically two URC teams almost in a warm-up game with a bit more at stake. What's your thinking about that?
Yeah, that's it was very surprising with those. If you look at those stats, I mean, I also thought that the Lions would be very dominant, um, far more dominant than this. And like you say, I mean, the Sharks were doing all the playing. The Lions were defending all the time, and fortunately, only conceded that one try. It could have been far worse. So obviously, their defense was holding out. But yeah, look, coming back to this as well, I mean, the coach just said that they're going to have to take accountability for what happened. Yeah. And I just want to come back onto what Belinda said there. It definitely had to do with BMT. The Sharks showed that against the Bulls. They did it again, yeah, where the Lions were absolutely disastrous in those last few seconds of that game. Um, and I mean, the coach was gutted. We were gutted, but he said that they need to take accountability. And going into the CRC, they've got a lot of work. They've got a lot of work ahead of them, because now we're going to play against teams also with international players in their sides, tricky conditions, weather conditions, and that on the Lions. Although they showed a lot of promise in the Currie Cup, there's work ahead for them.
And did you said a lot. One time they actually lost against the Sharks was when they deviated from their successful game plan. Did we see any of that, or did they stick to what they were supposed to do? They were just outplayed on the day.
There was a lot of kicking again in this game that I noticed, or that we noticed from Nico Steyn specifically. I don't know if it was because of the weather or the instruction came this time from the coaches, to kick and, try and do that. So they did kick again more than they have been in the last few games. But you know what? I think the Sox just didn't allow them to play their natural game plan. And hats off to them. They actually suffocated us, and they kept the ball in play. We had to fight to get the ball from them. So I think it was a little bit of both. But the Sharks, I think, just denied the Lions from playing their usual style.
Linda, tell me, for the team that had such a woeful URC, to end up with the only 2 trophies in the entire South African rugby universe, you want to call it that. Was there method behind the madness? Maybe, John Plumtree and Neil Powell in the same coaching box all the time, with JP Peterson maybe, doing a bit of a cameo here or there. Is that actually a long-term plan that's maybe now coming together? Is that what we're seeing? Or was it a flash in the pan, both those trophies?
No, I think the Sharks are definitely building something. Obviously, they're mindful of that dire URC season that they had, and they want to fix that. They're very cognizant of the need to fix that. Um, I think we have to give JP his flowers for how well he did in his first senior coaching role. He really, I think one of the first conversations you and I had this Currie Cup, you asked me what I thought about JP stepping into the coaching role and was it working? Um, because they did have a run of losses at the beginning of the season, but I really think for someone who had never coached a senior competition before, he did exceptionally well. And yes, John Plumtree stepped in towards the end of the competition, and he was always kind of in the background, and Neil was always in the background and all of that. But I think JP really deserves the credit for this victory. He built the momentum. He got the team to where they were. He backed some of those players. I mean, I still think having Lionel Cronje, even though he didn't start in the final, like he came in off the bench, having him in the team was really a stroke of genius. He did so well. So I think they are building something, and now you'll see they've announced their touring squad for the URC, and there's some of the same players have carried through into that touring squad. Some of the players from the Currie Cup that have never played URC before have carried through into that squad. So I think they are building something, and they'll definitely be hoping to do well, certainly much better than they did last season in this URC.
Tell me, give me some positives that you got from the season and some negatives that you're still worried about a little bit if you have to look at your Sharks going forward.
Yeah, so I'll start with the negatives, and I'll say I'm still really worried about our scrum. I think we just had like slightly over a 50% scrum success rate in the final, which is definitely not what you want. It's something that we spoke about last week as well as something that they needed to work on, and they definitely didn't improve enough ahead of the final. So that I think will be a focal point. But of course, they'll have some of their stronger scrummagers coming back into the team over the course of the URC, especially once the Springboks are back. So that would be my one negative. I think what we've spoken about repeatedly is the biggest positive for me. It's the attitude. You can train things. You can train things like defense. You can train things like scrumming, all of that kind of thing. But attitude is something that the players have to work on internally. And I think we really saw that. The coaches have obviously instilled this belief in them, and they never let themselves give up hope in any of the games towards the end. And I think if they can carry that through in the URC, it's that thing we talk about with the Springboks all the time as well, this back to the wall rugby, and how we can win the matches that matter, chasing lost causes and all of those things that we hear about. I think if we can see that again from the Sharks, if they can carry that through into the URC, they'll definitely have a better season. And of course, they, as Clinton was saying with the stats, they had some really good attacking play in this final that I'm hoping, and throughout the season, and some good young talent that they've developed as well. So all of those things, I'm hoping we can carry through.
I'll get back to this just now. I just wanted to hear what Clinton thinks about the Lions. Your positives and negatives, Clinton, about the season.
Yeah, the positives are we've grown exceptional depth in the union through this Currie Cup. A season or two ago, there was major concern if we had injuries to our frontline players in the URC, what next? But I mean, these group of players have stood up. They've really, given a good account of themselves. We've had some real stars that have come through, like Renzo du Plessis, Nico Stanier has been playing well. Sam Francis. There's a list of them. So I think that bodes well for the URC. And obviously, there's going to be about 10 players coming back to the Lions now that weren't in the final. URC players, and one or two of our new signings. So that will obviously, be a big plus for the Lions. And naturally, the URC coaching core will be back. So that's the positive for me. negative is the negative part is even throughout the season where we played well, there was a little bit of inconsistency creeping in again at times. And I just hope this is not going to be repeated in the URC, because we all know what happened in the last season where the Lions, I think in the beginning of the competition, there were about 5 games where they lost by 3 or less. And they were it was inconsistency. Had they won those games in the beginning, they wouldn't have had to start chasing shadows at the end to try and qualify. So, yeah, consistency could be an issue, and big match temperament is going to have to be present for us. We cannot have a repeat of what happened there in this final. But yeah, I mean, if the Lions can build on what they did here and add these other players in, into the URC side and that, I do believe the team is capable of getting to the knockouts. Yeah, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be another tough competition. They're going to have to hit the deck running against Ulster this Saturday and Edinburgh the week after that to really make a statement. You don't want to start on a losing note. So the Lions have got all to play for, and like the coach says, they need to be held accountable for what happened there, and they've got to try and put that performance out of their minds as quick as possible and regroup, which I hope they're doing because it's already Tuesday now, and regroup for the RC. And yeah, it's very long overdue that the Lions get to like a knockout of a big competition again.
Herbal Iceman Cooling Gel, the secret player on the rugby field.
Well, now getting back to those players, the Sharks started off badly. They lost their first 3 games, and those are the only ones they lost, except for the draw that they, against the Bulls. But getting back to the whole way that this tournament was approached and how it ended, started with young players, started with junior coaches given an opportunity, and then they started progressing and started doing well, and then the seniors guys stepped in, and the junior guys had to take a step back. Do you think that was the right thing? Was it fair to those players and to those coaches? And Clint, I'm going to ask you the same question about Mzwaki Nkosi and Wessel Roux. But let's hear what Belinda said. Do you think that was fair? Do you think that was the right approach? Or does it, sort of taking the shine of the victory here?
I think it's a tricky one. I think there was a lot of factors at play. Some of those younger players had to go and play in the under-21 competition as well. So it's again that whole conversation around the various different competitions all happening at the same time. So yeah, it would have been great to see all those young guys be able to play all the way through. But as we were moving into the URC closer to the start of the competition, we obviously needed those players to get some game time. So I think they tried to balance it as best they could, because they certainly didn't drop all of the young players. Players like Lily Bester, Lorenzo Julius, those guys, they stayed in the squad. So I think they tried as hard as they could to mix it up and to keep some of the young talent while still bringing in some of the URC players and getting them to get some game time, and then obviously bolstering the team when we were in the semis and the final. You obviously want to field the strongest team you can. Whether that feels fair to the other players that got them there in the first place is hard to know, but I think some of those young players put their hand up enough that they've been included in the URC squad. So I think it worked out well for them in the end. It's a tricky one.
Sorry, Clinton.
Yeah, I'll echo exactly what Belinda said there. We all felt that the Lions were doing so well in the beginning of the competition. It's only fair to let those players take them through to the final. When we got to midstream, like Belinda said, the under-21 competition and under-19 started again. So obviously they had to send some of those Currie Cup players into those competitions to play, and they felt it was an ideal opportunity to give our URC players a run because there wasn't any warm-ups before this URC. So they fielded basically a full-strength side, barring 3 or 4 injured players against the Bulls. So it was mission accomplished, if you like, to give those guys a run. And also, when we got towards the end of the final, yes, they started including more URC players, but I think your players that really stood out in the Currie Cup were still involved at the end and came off the bench. So, yeah, like Belinda said, it was a bit tricky. They had to balance it out there because of all these competitions happening at the same time. But when you get to the business end of a competition, you want to try and put your best in. There is always going to be a player or two that's going to be sacrificed and you feel it's unfair on them. but I suppose they've got to look at the big picture and want to try and land a trophy. But then again, we have yet to see the squad named for the URC. We played 2 games now, and then we obviously tour. So I wouldn't be surprised if quite a few of these Currie Cup players are involved or included into that URC touring squad. The likes of Renzo Duplessis, Jared Gaines, there's quite a few of them that put their hands up.
Right. Just let's wrap this up. But tell me, what would be a successful season in the URC for the Lions? Where would you like to see them end, apart from being right on top?
That should be an absolute dream come true. Yeah, realistically, top 8. I think they've got the players in the squad to definitely get there. I saw Cash mentioning earlier in the season their target was top 4. You might feel that he's being over optimistic, but he said that they just believe that their systems and their structures are in place to have a successful season. But I think if the Lions get into the top 8 and qualify for the Champions Cup, it'll be a big leap in the right direction compared to the disappointment of missing out closely in the last 2 seasons.
Belinda, for the Sharks?
Yeah, I mean, probably the same. I think given the side that we have and the talent at our disposal, I would say top 4 is probably what we should be aiming for. But then I would temper that with a bit of like objectivity and say, given the season we had last year, let's build on that and say top 8 would be like the goal. But then ultimately, I would be very happy if we made it to top 4. If we could win it, even happier. If we could say we won Challenge Cup, Currie Cup, and URC, I'd be such a happy little Sharks fan.
No, don't get too far ahead of yourself.
No, I'm pacing myself. But you asked what the dream would be. That would be the dream. Realistically, top 8.
How much do you think the absence of the Springboks is gonna hurt you guys? Did you guys build enough depth now, you think, without the Springboks? And you specifically mentioned the scrum. So while you're talking about it, I was just thinking about that. Ox and everybody else coming back and Eben and the likes. But until they come back, do you have enough depth now to take you through this first part of the season, not to fall too far behind in the beginning? What do you think?
So I'm still worried about the scrum in the beginning of the season before the Springboks come back. I think it's going to definitely have to be a focal point. But we also have had a lot of injuries, and I'm hoping that some of those players are going to start coming back in. Yeah, we can't afford to start the season the way we started last year with a string of losses, the way we started the Currie Cup. You just can't come back from behind in those kind of competitions. You have to start the way you mean to go on, to coin a cliche. So it is always a worry, and that's always the challenge when you have so many Springboks in the side, is that it's disruptive. It doesn't let you get off to a good start, but they need to work around that. And I think that has been the whole point of the way they approach the Currie Cup. And hopefully it pays dividends now.
All right. Final word for you, Belinda, about your Sharkies. Anything positive you want to say to them? Something encouraging, a message?
Well, I think the first thing I want to say is commiserations to Clinton, because really that game could have gone either way. I mean, at halftime, 0-0. When does that happen? I think I still WhatsApped you at the time because it's like, what on earth is going on here? It really could have gone either way, and so I know it's heartbreaking. But commiserations to your team. It was really a well played final. And obviously to my Sharks, I don't have words for how proud I am of them, because they got off to such a rocky start this season, and they just never gave up, and it paid off in the end. And I think it's going to continue to pay off as they get ready for the URC. So I'm really excited about the URC this season. I think it's going to be a good one for us.
Clinton, from your side?
Yeah, also, again, congratulations to your team, Belinda. Like I mentioned, to do that 2 weeks running, it's not an easy thing to do. And you probably are the deserved winners in the end. I wouldn't have said this on Saturday. But looking at it in hindsight now, you guys are, I mean, it showed a lot of grit and mettle to do what you guys did in 2 weeks in a row. For the Lions, I just think that they have been together now as a group 2-3 URC seasons with some good additions that we've brought in. And I'm particularly happy with the fact that Kate Voliter has stepped up in the last 3 weeks and is injury free. I just hope that lasts. But yeah, I think there's a lot of promise at this union, and they are hungry. I mean, they were hungry before this Currie Cup final, but I think they're hungry, and I think they will succeed. I think we'll definitely be in the knockouts.
All right, you too. Thank you very much for all your time you allocated to me, and late nights we had recording this, and some of them were better than others. We were more awake for some than we were for others. But thank you very much. I really appreciated it.
Thanks, MP.
Thanks again. Thank you.
Herbal Iceman Cooling Gel, the secret player on the rugby field.